When you think about your period, do you think of it as your superpower or do you think of it as that annoying thing that pops up once a month to totally put out your life? Well, if you're leaning more towards the latter, that is all going to change for you after today's episode on the Crystal Vision podcast with nutrition coach Dinara Mukh. We dive deep into how your hormones change during the month and how you can use each phase of your cycle to your advantage in life and business. No, it is not a hindrance, but actually a superpower, as you will find out today. Make sure to share this podcast with the women in your life so that they can start to feel empowered by their bodies too. And most importantly, enjoy the episode. See you in there. Hello and welcome to the Crystal Vision podcast, where we dive deep into the strategies and energetics of business, money, and mindset mastery so as to create the next generation of wildly wealthy women. My name is Olivia Clare and I'm a serial entrepreneur who is obsessed with giving you all of the tools that you need to create your crystal clear vision of success. Each week, you will hone in on your unique zone of genius and embody the highest version of yourself to reverse engineer your way to your dream life. If you're ready to let go of the hustle and effortlessly call in more money, more growth, and more fulfillment, stay tuned. Hi, Dinara. Welcome to the Crystal Vision podcast. How are you doing today?
Hi, Olivia. I'm so happy to be here. Yeah, I'm doing wonderful. It's sunny. I'm in France, so it's wonderful. It's morning. I know it's evening for you, but I'm excited to have this chat with you.
Yes, Euro summer. Everyone from Australia is jetting off to Europe right now. So I love it. You're already there, living it up in the summer weather.
I can hear a lot of you in southern France. I hear the accents, and I'm like, oh, Aussies.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. I am so excited to talk to you because we're talking about something that I'm really passionate about, which is women having knowledge about their cycles. And you have an incredible TED Talk, which we will link in the show notes as well, that I watched in preparation. And I feel really grateful that I've had this awareness around my cycle for probably the last year now. But so many women don't have awareness because we don't get taught about it at all. We get taught very certain things in school about sex education. I went to a Catholic school, so it was mainly just don't do it, which is really, really helpful. But I want to know, why don't we talk about periods?
Yeah, I love that question because the period topic is such a taboo topic. And I think, and I kind of mentioned it in my TED Talk, I decided to go a little bit nerdy and kind of go way back into the history of periods and why do we have such an interesting relationship with it. And actually, back in the days, periods used to be counted as the superpower. They had magical powers. We used to use blood in order to help the crops grow and just so many magical things. And then this whole sort of witch deal came about, and women that were having these magical powers were considered witches. So then that whole beef became between them. Then church came in a little bit later, and it's church really that has done a lot of narrative around period. It was sort of segregated women for the time when they were bleeding. It wasn't a topic that we would have discussed. It was considered dirty, dangerous, and all these narratives. And you would think that this was hundreds of years ago, and it's not really something that should have stuck around. However, it really did, and it really created this sort of relationships with women's period specifically, that it is this dirty thing, it's this inconvenience. And that narrative continued out to the modern day, where women who are menstruate are basically it's almost like we're less than for that period of time because we're tired. And then that message got modernized and being like, well, my cramps, my periods. So we kind of got to the place now where we just think of period as this inconvenience, this time of the month. We often don't even refer to it as the bleed. And we just kind of refer to it as this inconvenience, as the time that really takes us out. And I'm a big believer that it actually does the opposite once you understand what's really happening in your body, because the menstrual cycle is just such a magical thing, and it's so much more than just our periods.
Oh, I love all of this. I totally agree with everything that you said, and it makes a lot of sense when you think about the history behind it, that that why we
Mm.
sort of approach it in the way that we do. And I love that you mentioned, because it's so true. It's like, oh, it's at that time of the month versus like you're bleeding. And it's something that 50% of the population goes through and we don't talk
Yeah.
about it. It actually blows my mind. But I'd love if you could go in a little bit deeper on why you think the bleeding is powerful, because I still get caught up in thinking that, oh, I'm so powerful when I'm ovulating. I'm so powerful in my follicular phase because I'm so productive. I get so much done. So I still get caught up in that and thinking, well, if I was a man, I could just wake up tomorrow and feel exactly the same and be able to get more done and hustle, hustle, hustle. So why do you think that bleed phase is powerful for women?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question because, of course, that very bleed phase, even though when I talk about that, I love my period, it's sort of like oxymoron. Women get this reaction, what? How can you possibly love your period? Because there is so much shame attached to it. And like in school, if you leak through, you're kind of always hiding the tampons, hiding the pads. But actually, what I invite women to do is more sort of talk about it and more bring it out because it is one of those topics that women want to discuss, but we've never been given the avenue or the sort of the vessel to even talk about it. And I've never had so many conversations with girls at the parties, with women at the parties. Whenever I say what I do, just everybody really wants to share their experience and everybody wants to talk about it, but we just weren't really, quote unquote, allowed or was it acceptable in society to do it. So the reason that I think that it's powerful, a lot of us, many, there's a big conversation around consciousness, enlightenment, trying to get more in tune with your body. And it's actually Eckhart Tolle said that women are actually the closest to being getting enlightened because of their menstrual cycles and specifically during their bleed time. And the reason that it happens, there's a number of reasons for it, but during your bleed, your hormones sort of at an all-time low, but women's brain chemistry changes throughout her cycle pretty significantly by up to 25%, which is why in the follicular phase, you're so focused, you're so sort of feel like a superwoman. And then that motivation, that desire to do things really does wane as we go closer to our periods. But then there's a magical thing that happens during our cycle. And actually, our brain tends to get pretty heightened during this time, and sort of the left and the right hemisphere, there's the middle part that connects the two, actually the most engaged during that time. So it's one of my favorite things to do during bleed specifically is to do things like intuition meditation. It's because sort of our logical side and our emotional sides are really heightened during this time. So it's a beautiful time just to sit in peace and quiet and tune into your intuition. For those of you that do meditation, those women would be a little bit more sort of in touch with their more inner sort of the inside world of themselves. But and there are times when you do meditations and you can go deeper or like deeper depending where you are. But during bleed in particular, it's actually such a beautiful time just to tune into your inner world. And I like to ask bigger questions during my period, like, we both have businesses and your listeners have their own businesses. So to me, it's like, is the project that I'm starting, does it feel good? Is the program that I want to launch, does it really align with me? And this is the beautiful time that your body will usually speak to you. And also when you really sort of go in and maybe bring the hands to your womb, it really does connect you to that inner feminine, beautiful part that really truly makes us women, which is why I think it's such a wonderful time for just such a beautiful time to begin your cycle, set intentions, and just allow for the rest of the month to unfold, knowing that you are going through it with the wisdom that your menstrual cycle is carrying you through.
I love that. I'm like, oh, the insights I can get during that phase. It's so good. And I remember having a conversation with a friend years and years and years ago. We were in school and she was on birth control and she would say, oh, I just hate getting my period. So she would continue to take her pill so she could skip it. And I never understood that because to me, especially the luteal phase, I feel like there's such a release that you get when you finally get your period. And it's like, I'm so connected with my body. Like I can just relax and let go and you can feel your hormones sort of shift. So I always love getting my period. I feel like the phase that's the hardest for me, and I also have, maybe this is TMI, but we should really talk about this. I have a longer cycle. So I feel like from my ovulation to my period phase ends up being like 10 days to 2 weeks, or like sometimes even more because I have a longer cycle. So I feel like I'm just forever in PMS. So what superpower can we draw from that phase, those weeks before our period comes, but after we've finished ovulating?
Yeah, well, sort of what you said as far as the 2 weeks, the time between ovulation and your period should be minimum 2 weeks, because
Yeah.
that is the time, yeah, that's when our body sort of goes through a whole different hormonal phase. And we kind of have two halves, I guess, of the cycle. There is a first half, which is the low hormone phase, which is our menstrual cycle when the hormones are the lowest. And then as they begin to rise into follicular phase, sort of the hormones slowly rising, and then between ovulation and luteal phase, this is the time of our high hormones. So there's a lot of things that are happening hormonally speaking. And the specific luteal phase, it should be at least 2 weeks. Otherwise, if you have short luteal phase, that would mean that you're not ovulating and you want to be ovulating. Ovulation is the start of the menstrual cycle because this is when you create hormones. It's also such a beautiful time of ovulation, and it's really a sign of health because there's so many hormonal things that are happening in order for ovulation to even happen. And this is when the body really does its magic. And then from ovulation until period, it's sort of got to produce all of its hormones until they peak and sort of shift again. But I love your questions about specifically the magic of the luteal phase, and it's that time from ovulation into menstrual cycle. So during that time, the hormone that comes on stage is progesterone. And progesterone is the hormone that female body can only produce after ovulation. It's because the follicle sort of pops in order to have an ovulation. That little follicle part from which the egg popped actually becomes this temporary gland in our body called the corpus luteum. And that's the gland that produces the hormone called progesterone. And then closer to the cycle, our body once again reabsorbs this gland, and then it does this process again. And this hormone progesterone, unfortunately, it's one of those hormones that most of the women are deficient simply because of the modern day life of the stress, because stress and progesterone, the cortisol and progesterone actually derive from the same mother hormone. But if your progesterone is in the right sort of amounts, right fluctuations, and you support your health, so that's why it comes up in a healthy amount, then you would experience this sort of sense of calm, sense of nesting. When we spoke about brain, it actually makes our brains more focused. So this is the time when we're able to really do a lot of deep work, a lot of when it comes to your business, this is when I schedule things like finances, admin stuff, editing, like the stuff that I just cannot think of doing in my follicular and ovulatory phase because I'm so outgoing and I'm just so interested in meeting people, chatting with people. But it's all of this ideation process that happens in the first half of the cycle. It has to get executed. So the gift of the luteal phase is actually that execution. It's really sitting and getting nitty gritty and allowing yourself to really focus and go deeper into your knowledge. And that's the gift of progesterone. Unfortunately, for many women, that PMS phase is often anything but calm. This is when we have a lot of anxiety pop up, breast tenderness, migraines, all of this bloating, all of the symptoms typically happen because we have unhealthy relation between estrogen and progesterone. And we can talk about it from the lifestyle point, how you can heal it. But one of the biggest things is sort of what you started to do is to track your cycle and really try to understand how it shifts. So that way you can recognize the pattern before you can actually fix it. So you know what you're healing. But yeah, the gift of the luteal phase is that focus, is that sort of determination, and it's that nesting part. Progesterone is the very dominant hormone in the third trimester when women are pregnant. And this is when usually women kind of they want to make their nursery, they want to make the room perfect, they get ready for the baby. So it's that mini time of our cycle that we experience that falls in that luteal phase.
That is so relatable. And yeah, I hope people listening can understand that. And there's just so much power in having awareness of what's going on in your body, and these hormones play such a big part in our life. Like, we can't really just pretend that they don't exist or they don't affect how we do life. So I think awareness, is just key. I would love to talk a little bit more about how our period affects how we might do business. And there was a stat that you brought up in your TED talk that I had to write down because I couldn't believe it. But it's that 30% of women have taken time off due to their period. And I'm so passionate about this. Like, I'm in my luteal phase and I'm exhausted. I need like 10 to 12 hours sleep at the moment, or just actually like the last 2 days because I've had a really busy week. And so I'm so lucky that I get to, I got to move a couple appointments in order to have that rest that I knew that my body really, really needed. But obviously that can be really hard if we work in a role that's like a 9 to 5, or where we're expected to be at the same capacity as we are meant, like all the time, which is unrealistic. But yes, how can our period affect how we work?
Yeah, you're right. Like 30% of women has taken some time off, and then many of them, most of them don't really say it because there is this like shame and stigma around periods. And I think if only as we sort of go through it, I do think that we're beginning to have more and more conversations around women's health, and this notion about what our bodies go through. Once we're able to normalize it, and once we understand that this is actually a beauty and not a hindrance sometimes, and then we can really have those conversations, and then we can really allow women who have particularly challenging times with their cycles to really take that time off. And period leave is not a new concept. It's been existent with many countries, in Japan, in Korea. There's places in Spain that are currently implementing it. And I heard that there is actually a little bit of it in Australia as well. Okay. Of course, it's depending on the company. But often the pushback actually comes from women who think that if they're going to take time off, it in some ways perceives them as weaker, when in reality, actually having a couple of days off or having sort of this easier workload on yourself during period will really make you that much stronger, because we don't work like men where we produce the same amount every single day. It's just not realistic. We still produce just the same as far as the productivity comes in. Our timing is just a little bit different. And I think really understanding that timing can really give so much power back to women. And when you talk specifically about business, it's just having this awareness is massive, because once you have awareness, you can really heal it. But also starting to track your cycle, trying to find the patterns, and also tracking your energy, because there are certain guidelines that I can give as far as what you can do during each phase of the cycle, but it will be somewhat individual to women. It will be like, for you, luteal phase, maybe for a long time, it's a little bit more challenging. And for some women, the first and second day of their period is when they just can't think. Maybe they have debilitating cramps, which, by the way, is not normal, and you can heal it. But it's just allowing you to have this sort of foresight. And even though you might work in the 9 to 5, but maybe if you know when your period comes, you can sort of take a little bit of a lighter load of the meetings. You may be taking a bit more frequent breaks throughout the day. You may be asking your boss if it's possible to work from home. For those of us that have a bit less control of our schedules, there's still a lot of things that you can implement once that come in. And I promise you, just the amount of energy and just how much it will feel for you to feel much more connected to your body, but also how much power it will give you for the rest of the cycle has been immense for me and the women that I worked with.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, there's so many different ways we can shift. Even if if you say, no, I've got the world's strictest boss, like I have to be doing the same output every single day that I go to work. There's so many other ways in which you can have grace with yourself during those times. Like, instead of, having pressure, to perform in a certain way at work, also make sure you do your 90-minute gym session and do this and do that. It's like, no, maybe let's go for a walk instead during this time, or do something that's a bit lighter on our bodies because that's what it needs. And I think exactly what you said, like taking less meetings, or if you are lucky enough to have a business or have some flexibility in your work, being able to for so long, while I was getting used to my cycle, I would put it in my calendar. So I would say, this is my follicular phase. Yeah, this is my luteal phase. So that when I would book meetings, I could see, oh, okay, I've got 3 meetings on the same day on my luteal phase. That's not happening. It's so powerful to actually have it there mapped out for you, and you can see it visually. So yeah, that would be another tip as well that I would have, or that's helped me in the past. But I honestly think that awareness and tracking your own cycle and being aware, oh, okay, I might feel this way today because of XYZ, can be the thing that makes the biggest difference.
Totally. Yeah, I love that. And one of the things that you mentioned, and I want to just really kind of double tap on it, is the grace periods, is like having grace with yourself. Because one of the biggest unexpected differences, I think, what tends to happen with my clients is this idea that is this sort of notion of becoming more self-compassionate towards themselves. Because I think women are very good at self-blaming, self-shaming, self-criticizing themselves if they're not performing up to the unrealistic, often, expectations that we set up for ourselves, because we have families to take care of, relationships, health, wellness, business. Like there's a lot of things. And often so many of us, and it's just because of the way we've been conditioned and socialized, we sort of put our people before ourselves. We must take care of everyone else, but also make sure that we ourselves do everything perfect. And there are times in your cycle where your body is not going to be on board. And it's going to feel like, oh my gosh, like my body is just not really listening to me. But actually, when you really listen to your body and know that this is a normal process, in fact, you can harness its powers and just find out the things that you can really do that work with your cycle. Women tend to develop this sense of self-compassion, self-love. They become kinder with themselves, and this self-blaming, self-shaming really gets mitigated, and it gets so much less. And that's, I think, the women that are leading with self-love, self-acceptance, self-compassion are usually the ones that are able to succeed and then keep this success in a sustainable way, rather than those that continuously blaming, shaming, and sort of blaming their bodies for failing them. So it's a really good point that you brought up, just allowing yourself to be kinder with yourself.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, I would love if you could talk us through a man's cycle and a women's cycle and how they're different. And the reason why I think both are really important. So if you're a man and you're listening to this is, and vice versa, actually, being able to understand the hormonal changes in the other 50% of the population is so important, like I think, and in your TED talk, you were talking about the man's cycle, which I didn't realize had a similar sort of structure to women. I knew it was 24 hours, but I didn't know that, in the morning they might feel differently than in the evening. And that's really important for partnership. It's really important if you have, male employees, for example, maybe schedule meetings at a certain time of the day, because you know that that's when they're going to be at their best. So I feel like this is just such important information, and I would love if you could explain it for us.
Definitely. And I do think that women's health, hormones, periods is not just a women's issue. It's both men's and women's issue, especially if we want to live in the world that's inclusive, that includes everybody and lives in the world of understanding. And any man has a woman that they either love, or it's their mother, or it's their sister. Like it's a conversation that needs to be had between the two. And I love the question about the difference between the two different cycles, between the two different sort of hormonal fluctuations, because I do think it allows us to have that self-compassion for each other a little bit more. So men also have hormonal fluctuations. Their hormones are slightly different, but as far as their fluctuations of it, it kind of in an interesting way sort of mimics women, yet it works on a very different timeline. So men's hormones fluctuate on a 24-hour basis. So meaning that their predominant hormone are cortisol and testosterone. And typically their hormones over the course of the night, while they sleep, their hormones get replenished sort of at an all-time low level. Their hormones get replenished. And as they rise by about 5 o'clock in the morning, their testosterone, their cortisol is peaking, meaning that they are ready to go. 5 a.m., I'm at the gym, I'm going to work out, I'm doing boxing, HIIT, CrossFit, whatever that is. And then they get into work, and typically their most sharpest moments in order to get the meetings most aware is usually happens between sort of 8 till about 1 o'clock. And this is when we look at our corporate clock, really, a lot of important meetings tend to happen from the morning until about lunch. And then at lunchtime from about 2 to sort of 6 o'clock, this is when their hormones slowly begin slightly waning. But what happens is they're more communicative. They want to be more outgoing. So this is the time when in the corporate world, a lot of the happy hours get scheduled between sort of 2 to 4 because we're social. Hey, let's hang out. Wonderful. From about 7 p.m., this is where their hormones slowly begin to wane. And this is when usually men want to sort of sit around couch, maybe read a little bit of a book, watch Netflix, sort of chill out, have dinner, prepare for the night, and go to bed. And this cycle repeats daily. So day in, day out. So doing activities that are primed for them, doing the same things every single day, exercising the same ways, having the same nutrition, fasting the same period of time is very much optimized for a male body, and it works for them, which is why this sort of 5 a.m. wake up clock, intermittent fasting,
morning
keto,
routine.
morning routine that is so intensely, like, it just has different multiple steps, including hardcore workouts at the gym, is really primed for male body, and they feel great like that. And what tends to happen is a lot of research has been done on male body, and it's basically been communicated as this is what's good for what's good for everybody. However, a female body operates on a completely different schedule, and our body, so we also have hormones that are fluctuate over the course of sort of 4 big chunks. We've got our menstrual phase, which is when our hormones get at an all-time low and they begin to replenish. This is for men, that happens at night. For us, that happens during menstrual phase. And then we go into our follicular phase when our hormones sort of begin to rise. And during follicular phase, we're very go, go, go. It's a great time to brainstorm, to plan things, sort of the same thing as for men would be from 8 o'clock till about 2 o'clock when there are a lot of important meetings tend to happen. Then during our ovulation is when we're very social, like, hey, let's go hang out. I feel amazing. So that's like kind of when in the grand scheme of timing of 24 hours, this is when our happy hour of our cycle, when we're just outgoing, great time to go on dates, meet people, date, do podcast interviews, anything that involves you to go and chat with people. And then we go into our luteal phase, which is sort of when our hormones begin to change and we need a bit of rest, we need a bit of nesting, kind of like what happens with men hormones from 7 p.m. onwards. We go through that phase over the course of luteal phase. So we change from one day to the next. We're not the same from 1 week to the next. Maybe that very strict, rigid morning routine of exercise worked for you in the first half of the cycle, but in the second half of the cycle, it actually tends to do the opposite. It tends to raise our stress hormones. It actually makes us feel sicker. And if we continue to adapt ourselves in the way that works with male body, naturally we're experiencing issues, and which is what we're seeing in female bodies, like intermittent fasting for prolonged period of time doesn't work for a female body. It tends to cause a lot of hormone imbalances. Things like continuously doing HIIT and CrossFit exercise doesn't work for us. It exhausts us. So there is a place and time for women to do workouts, for women to maybe go a little bit more low carb, for women to do fasting, but it's not every single day. And sort of learning and understanding when it's prime for you to do it, that's when you're going to bring your hormones back into balance. Because fitting into men's clock tends to leave. Today, we know that 85% of women struggle with painful periods or some sort of hormone imbalance. 75% of people with autoimmune disease are women. 85% of migraine sufferers are women. So women are experiencing a lot of these issues. And the big part of it is because we're trying to fit in on the menstrual cycle within this, just sort of like fighting against our bodies, when actually, when we can get in tune with our bodies and just and like work with our bodies and work with our hormones, and we'll really feel this sense of ease and balance so much more than otherwise.
Yes, this is powerful stuff. I want to hear your take on consistency then. I feel like this is something that comes up a lot. I had a conversation with someone the other day where I said I went through a phase where I did a lot of like weightlifting, and I actually found that the stress that it put my body through did not, like, it just wasn't good for me. My body tends to be leaner or feel like I was like so bloated. Like I'm better if I'm just walking or doing exercises that are really gentle. And that's just what works for me. And the topic came up around consistency, like, oh, well, maybe you just needed to stick with it. And I feel like that's something that it's a common theme for women. Just stick it out and you'll be fine. Yeah. And it's because, it'll be 4 weeks and then we'll get to a different phase and it will be fine. So how can we be consistent if we know that our wants and our needs will fluctuate from day to day?
I love that. I think, I mean, it's an interesting question. It depends how you look consistency. Like, I'm very consistent, but with my menstrual cycle. I just know exactly that this is the time that I'm going to be primed to running. Like, for example, in my follicular phase, I love to go for runs and for long swims and for long hikes. And I'm very consistent that I'm going to schedule it at that time. When it comes to sort of my luteal phase, more in the second half of the cycle, it very much will depend how I feel. And there's times when I can lift weights for quite a bit of it, but there's times when I'm going to drop the weight because I know that my body is just simply not primed for it. And then throughout my menstrual cycle, I would say I consistently take time off for about 2 to a couple of days where I don't work out. I don't feel like I'm not being consistent. In fact, if anything, I feel like I'm really respecting my body. So I think we have to define consistency and what consistency means, because consistency can mean like go every single day at the gym for an hour, and that's a very sort of, it's clearly the way, especially if there's comes a moment where you're like, okay, my body is just not agreeing with it. So I'm going to create a new schedule of consistency for myself. And the schedule of consistency is going to be consistent with my menstrual cycle, because what tends to happen is in the first half of our cycle, especially when it comes to working out, we're prone to muscle building. Our body has much easier access to glucose in order to burn that for energy. And we're able to build the muscle and do a lot of those things. In the second half of the cycle, because our predominant hormones are different, like progesterone, so we don't actually have as easy of an access to glucose. Our body will need to access it'll go first to fat. So it's a good thing because it allows us to burn fat, but also, but by the time once we start and get to it, often we put our body in the excess stress place, which is then releases cortisol. And if we go really hard in the second half of our cycle with releasing cortisol, it'll actually begin to store fat, and it'll eat into your muscle to get the energy before it'll eat into fat. So you might be building all of these muscles in the first half of the cycle, but keeping the same regime in the second half of the cycle, you tend to turn on the muscle wasting because our access to nutrition is different. So if you really want to create progress in your workouts and stay consistent, then working with your cycle is the most optimal way of doing it. You actually will get results. You will work out smarter, not harder, because working harder is actually we basically tend to flip the scale. Like we gain muscle and then we waste muscle. We gain muscle, we waste muscle. And there's quite a bit of data out there for some of the triathlon runners who would keep gaining weight. And they're like, I'm working out so much, but nothing is happening. It's because we do the opposite. We do positive things in one side, and then we do the same thing in the other side that actually sort of creates the opposite effect for us. So working with your cycle will give you more results, but it comes down to that learning and creating that awareness first.
Yeah, I absolutely love how you broke that down for us. And I love how in tune you are with the science and with the facts of the situation because I think consistency, especially, there's such a masculine view around it. A lot of our corporate hustle world is based on male hormones. So consistency makes a lot of sense for them if they reset every day. So I love the idea of like being really clear on what consistency means for women, and that it means being in tune with your cycle. And actually that, I had no idea that, our bodies even like respond to workouts differently at different times of the month. And it makes a lot of sense when I think about how my body responds. And, it's like that. I think you said in a TED Talk as well that your metabolism is a lot higher during your like luteal and bleeding phase, which is why we tend to eat more or crave more, but, not necessarily look any different when we look at ourselves in the mirror. I always find it's like day 2 of my period, I'm like, wow, all the bloating's gone. And I just know that that's what happens once a month and it's fine. So that is so interesting. I just love all this conversation. I am curious, how do we apply these concepts to a woman who may have lost her period or has an irregular period?
Great question. And I mean, the number one thing is something that I'd want to get to the bottom of why that happens, because the sort of the treatment and the bringing it back, bringing the cycles back will be very different depending of the reasons that women lose their periods. So some of the common reasons of women not having a period is, of course, if she's pregnant, naturally she won't have a period. So if you're missing period for a very long time, a pregnancy test might be a good idea. If you're sure you're not pregnant, in that case, another popular reason that tends to happen is excess stress, which is why during COVID, for many women, they have lost their periods at the start of the COVID or got delayed their periods, because stress will affect the way that your cycle works. And also, if your body is in a stressful situation, your hypothalamus, which is the gland in your head, will simply suspend the reproduction, because if you're under stress, having a baby and having a cycle is not a priority. So the body has this very smart way of shutting things down. So if you're overly stressed, that could be another reason. And in order to heal that, you will just have to implement stress management techniques and maybe get a bit realistic with what's actually going on in your life. Another massive stressor for the body is famine or not having enough nutrition. So for women that may be over exercising and under eating, they simply don't have the energy to do the energy requiring process that is reproduction, that is ovulation. So if you are under eating and you're getting under caloric deficit, once again, the hypothalamus will send a message to your body to shut down the reproductive system, because you simply don't have enough nutrients in order to bring a baby into the world, because that's how our body views things, essentially. Because at the core of it, women are, whether you want to get pregnant or have a baby or not, our body is designed to reproduce. So anything that messes with it, like excess stress, not enough nutrition, will shut down the ovulation. So in the case of hypothalamic amenorrhea, is the name for condition when you lose your periods because of over exercising. Can be very common among athlete women, or not even the women that are not even the women that are necessarily overly, let's say, muscular. Sometimes it can happen just with women cutting down calories to like 1,200 calories and then overworking to try to get to this, to try to lose weight, which is, by the way, is a myth. It just doesn't work that way, in which case your body will react to it. Another reason that periods can disappear is there could be thyroid issues, or there could be conditions like polycystic ovary syndrome, where the periods are just extended. So for all of those things, it's important to find the root cause of why your periods are irregular and treat that first. So whether it's having, for most of us, this happens due to lifestyle. So usually paying attention to your nutrition, changing how you eat, calming down your stress, introducing some gentle movement, prioritizing sleep, all of those things will typically will kind of will get your body into equilibrium. So your period will sort of slowly come back. If you have conditions like PCOS, and one of the most common reasons for it is insulin resistance, is again comes down to dietary changes and just trying to bring in the balanced meals, bring in nourishing your body so you can bring it back to equilibrium. And then from there, as you sort of regain your menstrual cycle back in, then you can bring a whole layer of trying to eat with your menstrual cycle and move with your menstrual cycle. But the first order of priority should always be, why have I lost the cycle? What is happening? Menstrual cycle is a fifth sign of health for women. So we'd have to, just like breathing, pulse, and all of those things are very important for our survival, our menstrual cycle just shows how healthy our body is. So the first order of things essentially should be that. And of course, unless you're going through perimenopause and menopause, in which case you're going through a completely different phase of life where your hormones are slowly waning, you don't necessarily need to bring your period back at that time, nor will you be able to, but it's more implementing that balanced diets, that holistic view of health, so you can transition through perimenopause and into menopause and into the next phase of life.
Wow, I love that. I didn't know. I'm learning so much on this episode that our period is a fifth sign of like vitality and health. It's so interesting. Oh, okay. I want to switch gears. I want to hear a little bit more about you. What is it that you're currently passionate about, and what is lighting you up, whether it's in life or in business?
Yeah, I love that question because there's a lot of things. So in life it's June when we're recording this. So it's the summer is coming up, and I've got my best friends are arriving from London. I used to live in London for a few years. So I'm super excited to just hang out with them and show them the French Riviera, which I think is going to be amazing. As far as with my work, I am currently relaunching my program for the third time, which is called Hormonal Peace. And it's every single time I do this program, it's just such an amazing adventure because I get a chance to take women from having not a lot of idea about their menstrual cycle and really reconnecting them so they can get more out of it. So that is always exciting. And another thing is I'm starting to speak at schools in something that I
Wow.
always wanted to do is to go and speak and give presentations to young girls. So that way they don't go through what our generation went through when we had no idea what's happening to our cycles and trying to bring more of that information to them. So sort of starting that education early. And up until now, all of the schools that I've approached have been very interested. And it is a hot topic for people. And I'm glad that
Mm.
we're having these conversations. So these are the things that I'm very excited to start bringing to younger generations and just teaching them about their periods. So they're not in the dark as to what the hell is going on with their bodies.
Yes. Oh, I love that. That lights me up that you've said that because I think it's just such important information for women, and the fact that they get to learn about that early on is just so good.
Thank you.
Amazing. We'll put a link to your website as well in bio so that if people want to sign up to the program, they can. I highly recommend it. If you don't know anything about your cycle and you want to learn, it can really change the way that you approach every aspect of your life. My final question is, what is your crystal vision for the future? So without revealing too much, what is it that you're working towards now so that in a few years' time, we'll be able to look back and say, amazing, she achieved it all?
That's such a wonderful question because it really does put me on the spot of having a clear vision as to where I actually need to get to.
You,
One of the things that I started to do is I wanted to speak more about the topic of women's health and really help women understand it. So I hope that the sort of the things that I'm working on is to bring some of this stuff into organizations to give them the language around women's health. So I've done a few things with companies up in the moment in order to just make women feel heard. And I want to do that through all of the platforms, be that my coaching programs, be that through schools, which is I'm slowly achieving. And I also want to bring it to companies and bigger organizations. So that way we start to have this conversation and we stop alienating women and making them feel like they're crazy or less than, and really giving them the language and understanding of their bodies. And I'd like to do it in all parts of business. So through all generations and through all places where women would benefit from it.
Yes, you are fighting the good fight. This is so important.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the corporate thing is so interesting as well because sometimes I think, or I'll have a conversation with a team member and I'll say, I'm so sorry I canceled this meeting today. And I want to say it's because I'm on my period, but you don't know. It's really hard to know what's appropriate and what's inappropriate in the workplace when talking about something that is also very natural. Like we would say, I had the flu, I was vomiting in the toilet. Like we're fine saying that, but we're not fine saying, I'm going through something I go through every single month and have since I was 11 and will until I'm 55. Anyway, it's like a side note. So yeah,
well, there's a once email I sent to this organization. They more menstrual health, more menstrual sort of focus, and the out of office that I got. I'm sorry, I can't respond to your email for the next 4 days because I'm bleeding. And
Oh
I'm
my
like,
goodness.
what?
I love it.
I know it's how empowering would that be though? It's not
Yeah.
that we're taking it off, but we're just prioritizing ourselves. So we're like this life balance creation and respecting our bodies. I
It's
think that vision of the
amazing.
world would be awesome.
Yeah, I love that. I'm gonna start using that. It's and
Do
just
it.
being able to talk about it and again creating a safe space for women to talk about it because I love that you said that right at the start that now every time you go to a party or you sit next to someone on a plane, I'm sure they're so curious to hear what you have to say and to actually have someone to talk to about it because it's just not normalized enough.
Absolutely. And they want to talk about it. And we should be talking
And we
about it.
should. Yes.
Mhm.
We've started today. So I hope everyone listening, if
Amazing.
you're a woman, think about it and talk to your friends about it. And yeah, slowly I feel like we're working towards a world where it's more normalized as it should be.
Yeah, I love that. Mm-hmm.
Amazing. Okay, is there anything I didn't ask you or any downloads coming through that you want to share with our audience before we can call this episode a success?
Yeah, a couple of things that kind of want to offer. If you do want to learn more about your cycle, I have a podcast which is called Feel Better, Be Better. Tune in. I talk a lot about menstrual cycles and just how to really, not just how to maybe sync in your workouts and all of the practical stuff, but also things like how our resilience changes, how our feminine energy shifts, like just all of those things if you're really interested to get in tune with your body. And the second thing is, if you're wondering what hormones are imbalanced and what's actually happening, I'm happy to give you a link for my hormone quiz. And it's a very easy thing that you can do yourself, and it will help you to kind of identify, because what I said is like the root cause is so important. So if you find out exactly what's the root cause of a particular issue, which is the quiz will tell you, it might be easier for you to really start addressing those health issues. Because the sooner you get healthy, the sooner you feel better.
Oh, yes. I love that. I'm going to go find that link and do it. There's always things we can improve. And I'm like, oh, yeah. What's going on? Thank you for offering that. That's so valuable. And yeah, where can people find you as well so they can connect with you and gobble up all your content and all the fun stuff?
Thank you. My name is Dinara.mukh, Dinara.mukh, and I'm the same name on Instagram, on TikTok, and on Facebook, and on LinkedIn, and all the socials.
It's everywhere. Yes.
Just everywhere. So if you DM me in one of those places, specifically Instagram is where I'm the most. If you have specific questions, I'm always happy to help.
Yay. Oh, thank you so much. Like I said, everything will be in the show notes as well. So you can just swipe up and hang out with I'm going to say it, Dinara. Dinara?
You did it.
Okay, well done. I did it. It's the most beautiful name in the world. Dinara Mukh. Are you joking?
Yeah.
Anyway, I'll start again. Thank you so much for joining me and joining us and really paving the way for people to talk more and more about this, because I'm sure, it's put you in some uncomfortable situations in the past or will in the future. So I'm so grateful that, we have a space to talk about this and that you're doing the thing. So thank you.
I love chatting with you. Thanks a lot, Olivia.
Awesome. I will see everyone in the next episode. Thanks, guys.